Hey, everybody, welcome to today's episode. I am so excited for you all to hear from Joshua Broome today. Joshua has quite the powerful story. He's going to share his testimony with us, and we're going to go into some really incredible conversations. He's also the author of a book called 7 Lies That Will Ruin Your Life, and he's the executive director of Walk Worthy, which is a division of the American Association of Christian Counselors. Joshua has a testimony of what I would call escaping the porn industry. And the reason that I think this conversation is so important for parents to hear is because our children are in a hyper-sexualized environment just by breathing air. As parents, we have to be equipped to have hard conversations. Yes, about porn. Yes, about technology. Yes, about what's happening in the culture around us. But we also need to be able to share our hearts with our children. And I think so often we want to hide our past. We want to cover up maybe the dark parts of our heart or the dark parts of our life, which does really the opposite in terms of building trust with our children. And so today we're gonna get a lot of facts. We're gonna get a lot of information that you as parents are gonna want to know just about what our children are facing. But I think even bigger than that, we're gonna really hear from a heart that has been redeemed, a redemptive story, and how that is playing out in his family and for the glory of God. So let's lean in and be informed. Hey, Joshua, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, so glad we were able to make this happen.
Yeah, me too. So before there's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about, starting with your story. But before we dive into your story, will you just tell everybody a little bit about you, your family, where you live, just background a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Joshua Broome. I live in Dallas, Texas, and I'm on staff at AACC, so the American Association of Christian Counselors. Tim Clinton founded that around 30 years ago, and I get to be on their executive team where I lead an initiative called Walk Worthy, where we are passionate and dedicated to creating curriculum, resources, devotionals, top to bottom around what does the Bible say about intimacy, relationships, and sex from a biblical construct. So just trying to inform the church about something it's really struggling with. And I have a unique story that just allows me to have a very vulnerable and relatable conversation with a lot of people dealing with sexual brokenness.
Incredible. And you have a wife and four little
That's right.
boys.
Yeah. So my wife's name's Hope, and we just celebrated 9 years of marriage, and we got 4 boys. So 7, 5, 3, and 1,
So
and they
fun.
are. You saw a sippy cup
I did.
somewhere,
I was like,
and
yeah,
it's
there's
like,
signs of life.
yeah. It's we have a lot of fun. We're actually about to go to Colorado as a family for about 16 days. So it's like the packing starts like 2 weeks
4
in
months
advance.
ahead of time, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But
Well,
man, it's so much fun being their dad, and my wife is the thing that keeps me grounded, that keeps me going. I would lose my head if it wasn't attached, but she would find it somehow. But
that's
it's so
great.
much fun getting to live right in the middle of what God has for me.
Well, I love it, and this audience is really an audience of parents. I think it's just I love the fact that you're in the throes of it, and really just have such a powerful ministry. But you also have a powerful story, and I think like me, a powerful ministry often comes out of a powerful story and
Absolutely.
some things that have been overcome and redemption. And so I'd love to start. I do want to get into some facts and some practical stuff, but I think the important part is sharing your story and where you're coming from and what you're doing right now before we get into those, because it has a lot to do with just the relational conversations that we're having with our children. And so if you wouldn't mind, give us just a brief overview of your testimony.
My story started when my mom, who was 15, got pregnant, and there was some pressure not to continue to be my mom. To what does it look like for a 15-year-old that wasn't even in a relationship with the man that got her pregnant? What did that look like? And for her, it just wasn't a decision. It was this might not have been what I planned, but this is what God, has presented me with. So I'm going to, to march forward into this, no matter how hard it's going to be, because
Praise
I
God.
believe that it's worth it. And so I'm living in this super small town in South Carolina, Pageland, South Carolina. So you got Matthews, Monroe across the state line, and Pageland's right there. And in that town, my mom worked really hard at a restaurant. We lived with my grandparents, so her
Okay.
parents, growing up. And my dad lived in that same city. And I think it's really important to just, we talk about fatherlessness, and
Yeah.
fatherlessness is a great predictor of many of the societal harms that we would all say, hey, in the West, these are things that are relatable struggles that we would love to help prevent our kids of living a life that would predict that they might struggle with these things. But fatherlessness is actually the best predictor of them struggling with those very things: poverty, crime,
That's right.
so on and so on. But that was my story. So fatherlessness being something I'm wrestling with, in the fact that I'm in this small town, but my dad, same age, same town, and literally his dad, my grandfather, owned the only gas station or convenience store in the area.
We're going to talk a lot about, facts and recommendations and some equipping, parents as we get into this conversation. But I think the framework of your story is what's so powerful, because it really helps to connect the importance of conversation and honest conversation with our families with some of the practical things that we have to talk about that are difficult. And so, if you would, let's just tee up the conversation with your testimony and your story, and then we'll kind of get into now what,
Yeah, yeah.
as we walk out of that.
Yeah, just being in the mental health field, just understanding attachment theory and just how it works. I think it's simply defined in understanding that we find ourselves needy in the places we have unmet needs. And where I had unmet needs was the role of a dad, a
Mm,
father, where my mom got pregnant with me at 15. An abortion was never an option for her, even
praise
though
God.
that was suggested to her. It was just never an option for her, and we just lived at, my grandparents. Like, it's like I had a tough upbringing in retrospect, but I had the time of my life. I was at grandma and grandpa's, and we were outside all the time, and she had two brothers and a sister, and her youngest brother was like 17, so he was like a big brother. But while I was growing up, as I got older, I began to understand that um, I was the only kid at the baseball or the football game that his dad wasn't there.
Hmm.
While like fatherlessness is somewhat normative, unfortunately, in our
Yeah.
society
Yeah.
today, it was not normal in the little town in South Carolina that I grew up in. And I was just, I became aware of, I don't have what other people have. And as you become aware of the thing that you don't have that you need, it's, you begin to introspectively ask yourselves these questions. And I remember as I was sitting at the restaurant that my mom worked at, she worked at this like, you get an entree and two sides
Oh yeah.
type of
Yeah.
deal for
Yeah.
lunch.
Good
Fried
old,
fried chicken,
ghetto
fried
Southern joint,
flounder.
right?
Yeah, like the best. And I would sit there, and I was a growing boy, so I was eating my like second lunch, and I would look out, and out the window there was this convenience store called Rogers, and this convenience store, there would be a green Z71 that would pull up, and there was this guy that would get out, and he would go in, and as he was leaving, this older gentleman would come out and tell him goodbye, and this would play out. And the older gentleman, Roger, was my grandfather, and the person in the Z71, his name was Dale, but he's also Roger, so Roger Jr., so he was a junior. And I would see the person that is my grandfather and that is my dad, but
Gracious.
I was never invited into their world, even though they were literally across the street. And, as a child, what doesn't make sense to you have to make sense of. And what, the way that I did that was it must be my problem. So if
Hmm.
it's my problem, if I'm inadequate, if I'm not good enough to be a part of their family, if I'm not good enough to be his son, then maybe I can become good enough. If I do good enough, if I become good enough,
Perform well
if
enough.
I achieve enough,
Yeah.
maybe then and only then I would feel as if I was enough. And it's part of my personality. Like the way in which God created me was, with a high achiever personality, which is a good thing. That if that personality is surrendered and submitted and under the person of Jesus, then that causes me to have good work ethic. It causes me to do things with excellence, which all those things honor God. But when brokenness enters the
Yeah.
picture, I believe that I have to do enough so I feel like I'm good enough, which is um, not good at all.
Yeah. So
And
dangerous.
yeah, and so I try to be the best student, try to be the best athlete, um, try to do as well as I could, and those were fine. But I was really trying to achieve what I thought it would feel like if I had a dad grab me by the shoulders and saying, "Son, I'm so proud of you."
Mm.
And I really believed in my soul that I could earn that, and I tried so hard. And my mom's amazing, and when I tell my story, I've been doing this for a long time, and
Yeah.
I never want to dishonor my dad, but he's we've had I'll get into it. We've had conversations. I've had conversations with his other kids, and um, it's just true.
It's
It's
just the
what I
truth,
share is
right?
true.
He did what he
And
could, or gave what he had,
yeah,
or didn't. I mean,
yeah,
it's just factual.
yeah. And at the same time, I never want to diminish my mom, because my mom, like, sometimes she hears me share my story. She's like, "I'm so sorry that you had a tough childhood." And I was like, "Mom, you gave me not only your best but your everything."
Yeah.
I like, we grew up in government housing. We had food stamps. But my mom did her best. Like I would somehow, like, she would find a way to get me to basketball camp. She would find a way to get me basketball shoes once a year. So I was not aware of our situation because my mom loved me so well and she provided for me so well. But the thing that she could not duplicate, like, she could never be my dad. And I
Right.
didn't need her to be, but I needed to be fathered,
Yeah.
and that caused me to try to seek from the world what I was lacking. And I was exposed to pornography for the first time when I was 13 years old, and you know not having a foundation of I didn't really have a grasp of the Bible, who God was, who I was in that story. We went to church sporadically when we were living with my grandparents, but my mom got married when I was like 7. That lasted for a few years, and then we were back on our own, and really just that interrupted the rhythm of us being in church, healthy
Church.
community, things like that. So I didn't really have a grasp of who I was. I didn't have a grasp of who God was, and the world was my teacher. And I
Man,
saw
say that
porn.
again. Say that
Yeah,
again. I mean,
yeah,
really, that preaches. I mean, if we don't intentionally teach, the world will and
yeah,
is, right? And
yeah.
so,
I
yeah,
I read a statistic that is pretty scary, that kids spend more time on they spend 66% of their day on the screen, and we get about 2 to 3 hours with them a day where we have their individualized attention. So, like, you do that math over time, and it's really scary of how much influence you have
yeah,
in contrast to what how much influence that TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, whatever content they might be consuming, wherever they might be, outside of our care.
right.
But yeah, so it's so important for us to be equipped for what we're going to encounter, because it's not if we will see porn, it's when we
That's
will
right.
see porn.
And
And
it's
the
younger and younger
question,
and younger.
yeah, and I would say that the question really is, if it's not a possibility, if it's something that's inevitable, The question would be, will you be equipped when you see it?
That's right.
Will you have will that be a foundational conversation that you would have, so you have a game plan when something happens? Because that's, that's parenting in a nutshell. It's like, okay,
Right.
when this happens, this is what we do.
What is our
uh,
response? Yeah.
yeah, because it's, we don't want to be reactionary. We want to be responsive. And if we are a slave to the circumstance, the person, the situation, if we are a slave to that, then we don't have any other option but to react. But responsive behavior is, well, there's core beliefs, there's foundational pieces of education that have been put in place where I'm not going to react. I'm going to respond based on something that's been poured into my mind, poured into my heart. It's written on my heart. It's written on my mind. It's been rehearsed and
That's
repeated,
right.
and I'm going to know how to respond when life happens, because it will. Jesus promises that. Jesus said, John 16:33, he says, I've told you all this stuff so that in me you can have peace. In this world you will have tribulation, but you can take heart, for I've overcome the world. He just said that to his disciples, where he's saying, hey, it's better that I go so the Holy Spirit can come. And he's saying, I've told you all this stuff so that you can only find peace in me. In this world, as believers, you will face trials and tribulations. The world will hurt you.
That's
You will
right.
fail people. People will fail you. We see this world full of debauchery, but you can take heart. You can have courage. Why? Because I've overcome the world. And I think it's so important for us to have that perspective. But I didn't. So I didn't have that perspective. So I see pornography at 13, and I see these pages, and I begin to believe, okay, if I have what I see, I'll feel what I don't. And the way that pornography works, it doesn't teach you about sex. It teaches you about consuming people. It teaches you not to love things. It teaches you it teaches you not to love people and use things. It teaches you to
Use.
love things and use people.
Yeah.
It teaches you to consume in contrast to contribute. And I believe, okay, well, if I consume this, or if I reenact this, I'll feel emotions where I don't. And I became sexually active very young. I was consuming pornography. And along the while, I start modeling, acting. All of a sudden, I start having all these opportunities to do stuff. I start making more money than I ever thought I would make. I go to college with the same mindset,
Mm.
and I'm so insecure. Um, just
Yeah.
like moments, like I remember I was in a fraternity, and on Tuesdays we would wear a tie and a pin and
All the things. Yeah.
all the stuff. And I got ridiculed because I had a clip on tie, and I was like, I don't know how to tie a tie. I've never put
A
a
tie.
real tie on. And it was in that moment that this this gentleman, who was my big brother in my fraternity, he taught me a lesson I would never forget. And it's a lesson that we get from the Bible. So he could have just grabbed one of his ties, wrapped it around his neck, tied it, and gave it to me. And that would have been helpful. But he didn't do that. He put the tie around my neck, and he showed me how to tie it, and then he untied it, and he had me do it. And I messed it up, and he untied it, and he had me do it.
It's the
And and,
training, right?
and after a few repetitions, I completed not the best, but a single Windsor tie. And it was like, wow, that man took the time to teach me something my dad never did.
Mm.
And in that moment, that was like, just a glimmer of, wow, like this is what I missed out on. But also that person wasn't my dad, but he gave me something I needed. And in the church, we talk about the different members of the body. And if you're fatherless, well, there's someone
That's right.
that's
Just
in that community that is there to step into the gap of your life. And that person doesn't become your father, but he teaches you what it means to be a man. And that's part of being in a local body. But yeah, like that moment happened, and that was powerful. But I continued essentially, living the same way I was living, but um, and then I get to the place where I'm doing pretty well modeling and acting. I go to Hollywood, and I think, you know, this just makes sense. I had representation there, and they were like, "Hey, if you put yourself in proximity to the industry you want to be in, regarding like auditions and stuff like that, you're going to be able to get so much more work, and the more work you get, you're going to build a body of work that would function, you know, as your
Goodness
real."
gracious. Right. And I'm just
And
thinking, like, oh gosh, you are walking with out into this from this tiny little town into Hollywood, like pretty much in insecurity.
oh yeah,
So I mean, it's just like just waiting, right? You're literally just waiting to be taken advantage of, really, because the foundation's not there and the insecurity is so high,
oh,
right?
absolutely,
It's
absolutely.
that's hard
Yeah. And
and vulnerable.
very vulnerable. And and then I was out there for a few years, and I had a tremendous amount of success. I had more success modeling than acting, and had the opportunity to train at the Improv in LA, and I had a great place to live. I had friends. My life, there was no reason for me to do what I did, but I did it anyway. And I think it just kind of points to, if you don't have a good reason to say no, you'll say
That's right.
yes to something you ought to say no to.
Yeah. Yeah. Swept away, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But 2 years into that, a group of girls came up to me at a bar, and they asked, "Hey, would you ever be interested in being in the porn industry?" And I just thought it was a bizarre question, because it's almost like when you look at porn, um, or even anything that's like fabricated or fictional, you're consuming it in a way where there is this dissociation, there is this
Mm-hmm.
this commodification of the people, and you get so detached from reality that you forget that the pixels on that screen is actually a person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's such a dangerous teacher.
Yeah.
But when I was asked if I wanted to be in the porn industry, it was like if I wanted to like hop into like a Transformers movie. Like, it was just so bizarre to me. Like, wait, this is a real thing. Like, this is a real people. This is a real job. And I think that because of my exposure and the way that I was living, um, like, my gut said no. My head said your mom will judo chop you in the throat, but I was curious enough about it where I'll at least meet the guy. And I go and meet this guy, and I had pre-decided that when I get to this place, um, when I get there, if it's like a sketchy place, I'm just gonna like get out of there. But we live in a day and time where people are masters of manipulation, and the way that the devil works is, he doesn't make a lie look terrible or
Right.
sketchy.
Absolutely.
It looks like a counterfeit of a good thing. And I get there, and it's this nice studio, and it's adjacent to Universal Studios, and it's this nice part of town. And I walk in, and strangely, in the same way when you walk down the hallway of my mainstream agent, when you walk down the hallway, you would see, if you'd made a cover of a magazine, they had them hanging on the wall, where it's like, these are people we represent who've done something good. And in the same way, this guy had people hanging on the wall, and but it was obviously pornography. And I was just like, this is weird but strangely
But so
similar.
familiar. I mean, it was
Yeah,
familiar.
yeah. And then I walk into his office, and as I walk into his office, he is so interesting, because he started with, "Okay, let me ask you three questions. How did you grow up? What are you doing in LA? And how or what do you want? What do you hope to accomplish?" And in retrospect, asking someone the very first
Yes.
question, "How
Right.
did you
Like
grow up?"
warning, warning, warning.
Yeah, because it was a value proposition. It was, what information can I extract from
That's
you
right.
that would maybe lead you, or lead me to believe that there is brokenness in your life where I can use that information to leverage it to manipulate you to get you to do
100%.
something I don't want you that you probably don't want to do. And I was like, well, I grew up pretty much just me and my mom. That was
And then he's like,
uh,
yep,
more than
gotcha.
enough for him. And I told him that, you know, I was in LA for the same reason most people are. I'm trying to be a creative, model, act. Um, I love videography, all this stuff. And he asked me what I hope to accomplish. And I was like, I guess be famous. And I think that was when he's really like, okay, I got this guy because
Mm-hmm.
it like a lot of people would say that. But when there's brokenness in your life, when you say you want to be famous, you're not saying that you don't want to excel at the thing in which you're passionate about so that you can be excellent in your career. What you're saying is, I feel unseen,
Mm-hmm. I want
I
to be
feel
seen, known.
unknown, and I feel like if I had what I've seen other people have, I'll feel what they do. And he saw, like, even though I was 22 years old, he saw a little boy that he really just wanted to feel like he was somebody. He didn't want to feel overlooked. He didn't want to feel like he didn't
Unknown. And
matter.
mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Great, I can make you famous. Um, you've got acting experience. They're parroting movies and whatnot. I'll make you famous. You'll make all this money." And then he's like, "Okay, what do you want to go by?" And I think it's so
That's
interesting the
so
fact.
fascinating.
Well,
Like
because
the
if you
identity,
look at
security, all of
yeah, I
it.
mean, you look at social media, like anyone who's antagonistic on social media, they generally have a fake profile. They have a meme for a photo and an obscure username because if I can detach myself from what I'm doing, then there's no consequence. And there's this false narrative that it's not really you. And
Mm-hmm.
we see this in gangs. We see like homeless people. You grow into this new name because it's different than who you actually are. And essentially, in the porn industry, if you will go by a different name, it removes an aspect of your humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So you would agree to do something that you would never do. And I said yes, and it blew up my life. I didn't really think about the consequence. I did one, and being from a small town only takes one person to know one thing for everyone to know everything. And my mom found out, my agent found out, and this was 2006, so a very different world. So when my mainstream, like all my representation, uh, everyone that represented me found out, they were like, "Hey, we think a lot of you, but we can't be associated with that industry. Um, we wish you the best." And
Are
then my
Could
mom,
I ask a question? Are you saying
sure.
it's a different world because now that probably wouldn't be the case?
I mean, I think
I'm so
if
curious.
I mean, if you look at, it would depend on what industry, because I mean, there were films that I did for HBO that were pornography, that were less like that they were less hardcore and less sexualized than traditional movies that I see very
Day in and
famous
day out.
actors. So I would say, 2006, like this is almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, I would say, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would say it would, based on, their stature, based on, how famous they were. But um, I don't think like me doing one thing would cause representation that I had to
To
fire me on
totally
the
walk
spot.
away. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I would say maybe I would be reprimanded, not to do it again or something like that, or I had to pay to get that taken down or something like that, like some kind of strategy. But I was just like, you're out of here. And um, and then like when my mom found out, it was even worse because like my mom always protected me, and I knew this like from the moment that this sweet lady came up to me when I was 13 years old, saying that she could get me this like Colgate commercial, and her name was Donna, and she was like this sweet, like older, like Southern lady, and she opened up a world of opportunities for me. But like my mom had to work really hard, like had to get,
Yeah.
like headshots, and like had to travel to places, and do all this stuff, which was like for some people it was like not that big of a deal, but for my
For your
mom, who was already, she's a single mom working 60 hours a week, and we're barely getting by, like something else, it was a huge deal. But my mom made so many sacrifices so that I could do that.
So it
And
wasn't just the fact that it was porn. It was the fact that, oh my gosh, the sacrifices have gone in. It was the whole of it,
yeah,
right? That it all blew up.
yeah, and then, essentially I hurt the only person that had never hurt me. And um, there was a moment where my mom was being abused, that I couldn't do anything about it. And Satan whispered into my mind, you can't even protect your mom. You say that, the thing that's most true about you is that you're your mother's son, but you can't even protect your mom. You're no good. And then when I hurt my mom, when I did that, it was like Satan doubled down on that, saying,
I mean,
see,
you're just like pile on
yeah,
between
you're,
the shame and the guilt and the insecurity and
yeah. So that happened, and then, I believed the lie. That, that's what I talk about often. It's like, if you believe a lie to be true, well, it might not be true in reality, but it's
but
true to you.
yeah.
And if you believe a lie to be true, and it seems to be true to you, then you live as if that lie is true. And I believe that I had squandered any and every opportunity, and this is the only thing I could do. So I thought, well, I'm going to take all of my ability, all of my charisma, all of my work ethic, and I'm going to pour it into this, and I'm going to make, I'm going to make the most money. I'm going to make more money than everyone. I'm going to do more movies than anyone. I'm going to, I'm going to be the best. And I was successful in those endeavors, and that from an external, from an outside looking in standpoint, I did over 1,000 movies. I made millions of dollars. I won all the awards, and I think in 2012, after being in that industry for 6 years, I won Performer of the Year, and I really thought, like, the metric that I set regarding the money, it was like, well, once I make $1 million, I'll feel a certain way. When I didn't, I'm like, oh, I just need to make a little more, a little more, a little more. And then, but with that award, like, the Performer of the Year award, it was like the industry, like all the studios and my peers said, "You're the best.
You're on the
You're the guy."
pedestal, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I got nominated for that 4 years in a row, but I'd never won. But in 2012, I won, and I thought when I won that award, it was going to mitigate a deficit within me. I thought it was going to do something for me. It was going to undo something I couldn't undo on my own. And when I won that award and it didn't give me what I thought it would, fell apart.
Mm.
The anxiety was amplified, the depression was deepened, and very quickly I found myself wanting to take my life
Mm.
because what I thought would fix me did. And soon after that, I walk into a bank and I needed permission to harm myself. And the way I was going to get it was I was going to go in with a check and slide it across the counter. And I wanted the teller to agree with me. I wanted her to say, "You're exactly who you think you are." And maybe say something under her breath, or something. And because historically I would go to ATM, Dropbox, I didn't want to hand a check to a person, because on the memo of the check it was clear what I was being compensated for.
Mm.
And on this day, that's what I wanted her to see it, and I wanted her to say it. And when she didn't see, when she saw it, she didn't say anything, and she was just kind to me. And when she didn't respond the way that I wanted her to, I just began to weep,
Mm.
because I was confused and I didn't know what to do.
Wow.
I just wanted, I just wanted the pain to stop, and I thought I'd gone too far.
Yeah.
And um, she came around the corner. She put her hand on my shoulder and she says, "Joshua, are you okay? Joshua, how can I help you?" And what she didn't know was that was the first time that I heard my real name. in about 18 months because I stopped answering the phone when my mom was calling. I stopped answering the phone when my friends or other family members were calling because I thought I disqualified myself from being in their presence. And really, I believe that I knew that she wanted me to stop doing what I was doing, but I didn't believe that that was an option. So I just stopped answering. And when she said my name, it just like, you know, it just like shattered this plausible reality based on shame and pride that I had created. And um, I wept and wept and wept. And I ran and I called my mom. And
Wow.
um, being a good Southern mama, she chewed me out pretty good because she was super concerned about me. I mean, rightly
Yeah,
so. I mean,
I can only imagine.
to me to this day, to this day, almost 50 people who I was close with, who were friends of mine, have taken their life via overdose or suicide. Um, there was a time in the industry that there was an HIV outbreak
Yeah.
where I had worked with someone. I'd had unprotected, you know, sex with someone who had HIV, and that person died. And my mom didn't know exactly what was going on, but she knew that calamity was going on in that industry, and she was reaching out to me. And the reason she was hurt because she just wanted to know if I was okay.
Right, right. Just being your
And
mom, right?
yeah, and after she let me know that I should have called her, she said, "Hey, I want you to know I'll always love you. You'll always be my son, but you're so much better than the way you've been living. Please come home." And I said, "Okay, mama." And I quit the industry that day. And um, I, got rid of my place and packed up my stuff. And I came home, and I didn't really know what to do. I
Yeah.
brought, I left that industry, but I brought all the brokenness with me. And I thought, okay, I've got, somewhat of a background in strength and conditioning, personal training, health and fitness, and maybe I can just build another kingdom. So that's what I did. I got a bunch of credentials and got a mentor, and that's the new hat that I put on it. And I really thought, and I think a lot of people do this, where I can't change, but maybe I can manage the perception that other people
Change
have of
things
me.
around, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So the way that I like to say it is I tried to put enough good dirt on my bad dirt so I didn't look dirty. I tried to outweigh the reality of my past with the accomplishments of today. And I thought if I did enough, it would outweigh the reality of who I used to be, even though in my heart of hearts, it's not something I had done. That's who I was.
Well,
And
then,
then after,
yeah, I was going to say, well, so you've come home now, you've started something else. The brokenness is still happening, but at what point did you find Jesus? Because it's clear in your story that you know Jesus. So at what point did you
yeah,
find Jesus? And then I want to sort of move into what you're doing now and how this background has infused you with wisdom and knowledge and an opportunity to help
yeah,
others.
yeah. I told you I was long-winded, but
No, you're great.
uh,
It's an incredible story.
yeah,
Incredible story.
I think this is the best part of the story, though. So
It's a pretty good
after,
part. I know where you're going with this. It's
yeah,
great. Yeah.
yeah. So after living that way for 2 years, the anxiety and the depression was still there, and then I meet this girl, and super gorgeous, best athlete in the gym, and she's always wearing her like Iowa cheerleading stuff. So very proud that she was an alumni. Very proud that she cheered there. And I asked her out on a date, a coffee date, a movie date. Go pick apples date, and it was nothing but no's, no, 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 no. And she finally said, "Hey, I'm going running. I like to go for a long run the morning before I go to church. So if you want to meet me Sunday morning for a long run, you can do that." And I was like, "I'll take whatever I can get." And I show up early, and she gets there. But I began to think before she got there, man, she doesn't hang out. Like the gym that I was part of, we hung out a lot, party a lot, and she wasn't really part of that. And I was like, she probably doesn't know my story. She certainly doesn't know my story. Yeah, if she knew anything about me, she wouldn't be here. And then I was like, I wasn't trying to be a man of integrity. I was like, hey, you're going to end up hurting me and this is going to blow up. So I'm going to do, my due diligence. I'm just going to tell you before,
I'm going to get ahead of it. Yeah.
yeah. And I was just like, hey, there's something, I want to tell you before, we get too far along. And it's that I'm this kid that his daddy didn't want. And that caused a lot of pain in my life. And I did a lot of things that I regret. And a lot of the decisions that I made that create shame in my life, some of them are the fact that I did a lot of pornography and it's still on the internet for the world to see. And that's who I am. And she was obviously very taken back by that statement. And we never made our way to running. We were just walking. And I was just waiting on her to say, hey, why don't you, get going? Or maybe she would chop me in the throat. Like I didn't know what to expect. But then all of a sudden she just turned to me. And, she's a elementary school teacher at the time. So like teachers just have this like teachers and moms, they just have like this demeanor, like the sometimes that she would say, to silence a room, she would just simply say, I'll wait. And it's just like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but she just had this like stature about her, even though she's, incredibly small. She would just, she just looked at me and said, I don't want to minimize your pain. I don't want to say that the reality of your relationship with your dad, like I can't personally understand, but I can't imagine how hard that must be. And I don't want to say that your decisions didn't have consequences or don't have consequences, but I do want to tell you that you're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done, and you won't be defined by the greatest thing you'll ever do, because you are not the author of you. God is. Do you know him?
Mm,
And I didn't. And I didn't know what to say. I wanted to lie. I wanted to lie and say that
yeah.
I did, but I couldn't speak. I was just like, I don't know what to say to that. And she's like, well, I've been following Jesus since I was in seventh grade. I'm not perfect by any means, but he's the foundation from which I live my life. So what kind of food do you like? And I was like, who are you? Like,
Like, what does this
what
even
what are you
mean?
talking
Yeah.
about? And she started asking me about like SMART goals or something. I'm like, I don't even know what an acronym is, at this point. And we just walked and talked, and she was interested in me, and I was just baffled why. And I went home and we text all week, and she invited me to church that following Saturday, that Saturday night. And I went and I heard the gospel and I responded to it. And it was
Gosh.
specific, this story about Mephibosheth. And Mephibosheth was the son of Jonathan. He was lame in both feet, and he was hiding in this place called Lodabar, which is essentially a desert wasteland right outside of Palestine. And he was hiding because his grandfather was Saul and his father was Jonathan. He was next in line to be king, but David was king. And if there's anyone that was in the previous lineage, then historically that person was hunted down and killed. So he was hiding because he thought death was, his future. And David found him, brought him in front of him, and didn't hurt him. He said, instead,
Mm,
I'm going to restore your land, invite you into my kingdom, and give you a seat at my table. And he didn't know how to respond to that. In 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 8, he even refers himself as a dead dog. He essentially, his response to David saying that was, don't you know who I am? And I was like, yes, that's me. Because like this Jesus stuff, he sounds amazing. And this grace stuff, it sounds incredible, but my own dad didn't want me.
yeah.
Like, don't you know who I am? And then he read about Hebrews 12:2, talking about the joy set before Jesus as he endured the cross. And in that moment, God opened my eyes and realized that while I could have been harmed many times, and I made many decisions that went against his original design for my life. In spite of that, he sent Jesus to intercede on my behalf and to die for me, knowing the worst about me because he loved me. And when I realized that the father that I always wanted I actually had access to. And he had been not only waiting on me, but he had been with me in the pit that was my life. I didn't know what else to do but to follow my face and to give my life to
Incredible.
Jesus. And pretty amazing that that girl, her name's Hope, which is pretty cool.
It's the best.
And
Yeah.
and that's my wife. And we've been married for 9 years, and we've got 4 kids. And Ephesians 3:20 is real. Like God stands ready to do exceedingly abundantly more than you could ever hope, dream, or imagine. Because I never would have had the guts to even. I don't even think I would have had the guts to think, much less dream or ask for anything that I have today. But what I love about my story is God redeemed my personality. And what I mean by that is, I was a basketball player. I wanted to coach so I could shoot well. I was an actor. I was a professional orator. So I wanted my speech, I wanted my communication, I wanted my body language. I needed a coach for all those things. For runway, I needed a coach for all those things. For acting, I needed a coach. So I was like, if I'm going to follow Jesus, I need a coach. And I walk into this church and I was like, hey, will anyone coach me on how to
Yeah.
follow Jesus?
Yes.
And this guy, Andrew, he said, I was going to give you a Bible and tell you to read the book of John and get plugged into a small group. But the Holy Spirit arrested me in that moment. And I was just like, I don't know how or why, but I need to pour my life out into this man. And
Wow.
he spent 15 to 20 hours a week with me for several weeks, which turned into several years of us meeting regularly. And he not only taught me how to read the Bible and taught me how to interpret and apply the Bible to my life, but he showed me how to live it out. And
True discipleship,
yeah,
which we don't
like
talk
for
enough
yeah,
about, right?
yeah, like First Thessalonians talks about they share their very own lives
Right.
with one another. So he like showed me, how do you respond to conflict? How do you parent? As a follower of Jesus, with a busy schedule, with a young family, with
It's
all this stuff.
incredible.
Like how, like
What a
what? How do
gift.
you? Yeah, yeah. Like how do you push back against the world when the world is pushing against you? Um, but I do that, and then I just fall in love with the Bible. I go to Liberty University, get a degree in Christian ministries, and start serving on church staff. And in the middle of that, somehow, some way, I end up on Tucker Carlson, and he asked me, "Hey, how did you go from being the top porn star in the United States to teaching the Bible?" And I was like, let me
Jesus.
yeah, and I literally walked him through Romans Road, and it was live on Fox, like 4.2 million people watching, and
Incredible.
no one stopped me. So I kept going, and that moment changed my life. But I love that God loved me enough to not let me open my mouth until I had something to say, because that was 6 years after I gave my life to Jesus. So, but
What
like in that
powerful.
moment, I started getting a lot of opportunities. But even before that, I had the opportunity to get mentored by an organization called the National Coalition that opposes sexual exploitation, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, sorry, and started talking about, hey, you could leverage your story
Yeah.
to impact legislation. And then and in my learning of, here's legislation that exists that is good, that hasn't made its way to the floor. Here's legislation that has holes in it that's actually detrimental for children. All of that, I just started just seeing this
Yeah.
data.
Seeing the vastness of what's
Yeah,
really unfolding across the country.
and what God did that I never would have imagined was He set me on this journey of understanding what what is pornography doing to our culture?
Yep.
What is pornography doing to our mind regarding neuroscience? Like how does it damage the prefrontal cortex? So, I mean, just the reality of this, that a child, so average age of exposure is somewhere between 8 to 11 years old. It's trending towards 8 years old because of the implementation of iPads and
Yep.
other devices in schools. It was 11 because of iPhones or cell phones.
But say it
But
again, because of iPads in schools.
Yeah,
because of
because of iPads,
computers
because
in
unprotected
schools.
iPads in
Right.
schools.
Right.
Um,
School
yeah,
email
just
addresses that allow kids to get to things that their parents think they've locked down. I mean,
yeah.
not to
That's,
mention the pornographic books that are being.
oh yeah, it's infiltrating
Yep.
the schools.
Yeah,
You know,
for
I mean,
sure.
84% of kids that see pornography for the first time that are 12 and under, 84% of the time it's secondhand exposure, meaning that they saw it at a school that a friend showed it to them, or they were somewhere on an unprotected device and they were looking for something that was not sexual,
That's
but they
right. It
found
just
something they were not looking for. Yeah, so
84% of the time,
yeah,
like
it's
megaphone.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, like average rate of exposure around 8 years old. I'm just like, gosh. But just think, just wrap your head around this. So pornography damages the prefrontal cortex of all people. I mean, you can see this on a CT scan. It because it's a dopamine hit that's so high that the only thing that is even comparable is either hard drugs or an orgasm. It like,
Like
but
it's higher than even the first hit of cocaine, often,
yeah,
right?
but because it's like, I mean, that's why like drugs do the thing that they do, because they're a manufactured, it manufactures a feeling that is natural. That's why, like, when you put something in your body that it doesn't recognize, it's not gonna be able to metabolize it in a way that your body was designed to metabolize it. So it's gonna have a negative effect on it. But so like this is impacting our brain to the extent. So the prefrontal cortex, what does it do? It allows impulse control and it regulates emotions. So an 8 year old, that part of their brain is only around 40% developed. So the part of the brain that the pornography is hitting at 8 years old is only 40% developed. And we can see on a CT scan of a 30-year-old man that it's leaving tracks to the extent where it's visible on a CT scan. And we're going to argue that that's something that we might should discuss with our kids. Like
Right.
it's changing the way that they understand emotions and their bodies and sex for
And
a
other
life.
people that are
Yeah,
people,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. So I mean, just the fact that that God did all of that, and that now that I'm on, I'm on staff at the largest Christian mental health organization in the world, and we're trying to develop resources around this because, I mean, the reality of it is at the church for the large part we don't talk about this, and what we don't say says something. And what I mean by that is when I'm talking to parents and they're like, well, I'm not sure if I want to have this conversation with them, I'm not sure if they're ready. Well, data says that they're seeing it as early as 8,
That's right.
um, and then around 13. By the age of 13, Barna did some pretty significant research. By the age of 13, 94% of boys at the age of 13, 94%, and 68% of girls have seen pornography. Not
98
Christians, not non-Christians, all kids.
total. And I think
Total.
too, I think parents often, they think it's just the boys. I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, it's not just boys. I mean, it's rising higher and higher with girls every year, correct?
Yeah, I mean, since 2020. So since 2020, and I would say since social media became what it is, and OnlyFans, because OnlyFans, it's so interesting to study because even like the monetization strategy for people making money off of social media, this is something that was implemented by TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, that was happening on porn sites 10 years before that was normalized. They've
Wow.
always been at the forefront of technology. For example, when we were just celebrating the age verification that happened, recently, where the Free Speech Coalition challenged the state of Texas, suing them, saying this was an infringement on your First Amendment rights, and the state of Texas, the Supreme Court came back and said, hey, there is no reason why pornography should not be regulated. The neuroscience, the anecdotal data, it's overwhelming. There's no reason. If alcohol, tobacco, and rated R movies are going to be regulated, certainly this is proven to be destructive and damaging to children. So there is no reason not to have that. And that was a huge win. But as we were building towards this 3 years ago, I'm sitting at Capitol Hill in the middle of a talk, and they're talking about age verification, and there already existed something called VPN Hub, which was an app that a popular website had created, and it was free, and it was rated 4 and up, and it bypassed the VPN that the state would put on your phone.
4 and up?
4 years old, 4 and up, 4 and up. Um, so I mean that's the reality of the porn industry. But I just but for me personally, I just love that Romans 8:28 all means all. So it and God will use to the extent of your story everything that you'll bring to the foot of the cross. And for me, if you'd have said that I would be traveling pretty much every week, speaking in churches, advocating for legislation, educating parents. Next week, for 2 weeks, I'll be in Colorado teaching essentially apologetics around sexual ethics to ninth through 12th graders for 2 weeks. We're building this narrative. Me and Sean McDowell, we're going through everything from transgenderism to
It's
homosexuality to what does
incredible.
the Bible say about sex? Is it a good thing? How should we look at it? I love that God redeemed my story to the extent where I'm actually attacking the thing that broke me, and I'm doing it with this this story that He's given me, but ultimately His Word. So
Just incredible. I have one last question, and it's a bit of a doozy.
okay,
But I face this a lot. I've been doing Bible studies for moms and parents for over 20 years, and there's a consistent answer I get when I talk to parents about sharing their own story, sharing their testimony, sharing their walk with Jesus. And our walk with Jesus is that we're an overcomer. I mean,
yeah,
if we wouldn't be called an overcomer if there was nothing to overcome, right?
right,
And so a lot of times I get pushback or panic in that. And the common one is this: if I tell my kids I smoked pot, I'm giving them permission to smoke pot. If I tell my kids I'm giving them permission. And, I would love to get your take on this, but often my response back to that is, did you tell them what the result was? Did you tell them the guilt that you felt? Did you tell them the shame? Did you tell them, you know, what it felt like, what it did? Because if we're outside of God's will, something doesn't feel right.
yeah,
That there's something you have to overcome, and so I just push back. I'm like, no, I actually think stories, our own story, is what helps to build relationship and not make us the hero, but the
yeah,
herald in our children's lives. Like, I'm pointing you back. This is who I needed. You're going to need him too. And so I'm curious with the story that you have just told, and you have 4 boys.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on age appropriately, but sharing your story? Or is it something that you've thought through, you're comfortable with, you're passionate about? What say you to parents when they have a story, and it'd be easier to hide it or more comfortable to hide it than to give it away?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what am I supposed to do, like as a parent, to love God and to love others, and part of loving God and loving others is telling the truth, and I have to tell them the truth, and because if I don't, then I'm withholding the truth. And in the same way that I tell them, hey, don't touch the stove, it's hot. They could see, well, I'm just going to see for myself, and I'm going to touch the stove, and I'm going to get burned. Or they could trust their dad. And I think an even more powerful, story would be, well, Dad touched the stove once, and I got burned, and I love you so much that I don't want you to get burned. And for me, I share, hey, um, Dad made a lot of bad choices, and those bad choices hurt a lot of people. But when I met your mom, she told me about Jesus, and Jesus, he actually lived a perfect life because no one can be perfect. Everybody makes mistakes. And I want to read something to you right before we
Yeah.
finish. I
Yeah.
think it's really powerful. But I, I get to share with them, hey, age appropriately, Teddy made a lot of bad choices. They don't need to know exactly what, but I made a lot of bad choices. And as they get older, they've got full permission to ask me whatever they want. Um, but I made a lot of bad choices, believing that if I tried to chase after perfection, then it would make me feel some sort of way. And guess what? No one's perfect. No one. No one is perfect. I think that it's more dangerous for them believing that you're perfect and you
Yeah.
never make mistakes
Agreed.
than them live in the reality where they do make mistakes, and then they're captive by their shame, and they feel like they can't tell you the thing they did. That's why I love Kristen's book, Good Book Bad Pictures. It's like this narrative. Hey, there are things in the world that are not good for you to see. Private parts are private and they should not be in books or on movies. And if you see them in the same way, if you're scared, come tell mom and dad. If you get hurt, come tell mom and dad. If you see something you shouldn't have seen, guess what? You're not in trouble. You're not bad. But please come and bring those feelings to mom and dad so we can talk about them. And I think like that's the narrative. We have to
Amen.
create a
Amen.
safe space where they can bring their questions, because the most dangerous thing we could ever do is create a narrative where they're supposed to be perfect, and even worse, that they can't bring us all their questions.
Incredible.
And trust me, I have a 7-year old that asks 6 billion questions a day. But I have to repent at times because, gosh, like God looks at us and tells us to be childlike, and He wants us to look at Him with wonder and ask all the questions,
Yeah.
you
Amen.
know?
So
Um,
great.
so I would say that it's like
Okay.
whatever part of your story, guess what? We all have a story, and look at Moses' story, look at Abraham's story, look at David's story, look at Peter's story. Um, that God didn't omit the mistakes of men or women in the Bible. He redeemed them and he gave them an opportunity. Where that's why I think Psalm 51 is so beautiful. That David did something he shouldn't have done, and then he had a friend that loved him enough to correct him. And David, exhibiting being a man after God's own heart, what did he do? He didn't say, well, um, well, everything will be fine, or it wasn't my fault, or no. He came to God. He came to God, and he repented.
So
And he
great.
asked God to do the thing that he could not do. And
That's where the
I think
freedom is, right?
yeah,
That's where
that's
the
what, yeah,
freedom is.
because we can only be as free as we're willing to be honest.
Amen. Amen. Okay, parents, I know that is a huge story and probably one that you have not heard before. I mean, God is such a redemptive God, and the fact that He would take a story and turn it into what is happening right now in Joshua's life is just a picture for all of us. It's also a picture for our children. And so there are a few things to take away with this. First, God wants to use your story, and He wants to use your story even in the life of your children. So, being vulnerable in age appropriate ways with your children builds trust, it builds security, and that is the foundation for strong identities. You heard him talk about being insecure. Well, the foundations weren't there for him to build that security in his life, and his identity was shaken because of that. So, the conversations that you need to have with your children, even when they're hard and when they're difficult, the fact that you trust your children enough to have the hard conversation with them builds in them trust in you and a strong foundation for them. So I hope as you listened to that story, you then take away what he lived through, but what he's also learned about what that lifestyle is doing, whether you're the one contributing or the one that it's consuming. It's changing children's brains. And so we have to be brave enough. We have to know the information, learn the information, believe the information and the facts, and then have age appropriate conversations about those facts, because our children's minds and hearts and futures and souls and even relationships really count on them having the truth. So again, hope you enjoyed it. Hope it's helpful. Lean in to the information that he shared and to the book that he's written. and what God's done with his life. And when you do so, I hope it helps you parent with purpose, disciple with direction, and leave an intentional legacy.